Would agree with that. I think he's got basically best of all three worlds. I haven't played a player like him ever, to be honest. It's needed, particularly the beginning of the third, which was the case. So I'm glad to.
Towards the end of the first, probably the beginning of the second, right away, I kind of reset because very swirly, windy conditions, and that affects a lot, obviously, the way you play, the way you feel.
Djokovic walked into Indian Wells 2026 expecting a tournament. What he found instead was a complete takeover. Millions of fans had already been storming the grounds for days before he even hit a single ball in competition. The overwhelming majority came for one man. The Spanish army had quietly converted California into their territory. Red and yellow flags draped across the grandstands, Spanish chants bouncing off the desert mountains. Stadium 1 vibrating at a frequency that only one man's name could produce. Then Saturday happened. Alcaraz stepped out in a fresh haircut and orange shirt, and within 66 minutes had dismantled Grigor Dimitrov so completely that the final score, 6-2, 6-3, barely captures how one-sided it actually was. The performance was so suffocating that Dimitrov high-fived him during a changeover just to acknowledge something beyond a normal tennis result. Meanwhile, the shock hitting Djokovic was real and impossible to disguise. Stomach problems surfacing. Under desert lights, 2 hours, 12 minutes against a player sitting 57th in the world. The five-time champion of this exact tournament looked like a man still searching for something he left behind somewhere between Melbourne and the California desert. Subscribe right now, because what unfolds next inside this draw is genuinely unmissable. The last time Djokovic genuinely owned Indian Wells was 2016, a decade ago. Since then, 5 attempts without making it past the 4th round, dating all the way back to 2017. 5 tournaments where the desert somehow exposed something in his game that other venues never quite did, and yet here he was in 2026, fresh off an Australian Open final, publicly declaring he wanted another title, another Grand Slam, another shot at history, walking straight into a California that had already decided who it belonged to. That decision wasn't made on Saturday. It was made the moment Alcaraz's Spanish army started arriving. Let's talk about what this fanbase actually did to Indian Wells this week, because the atmosphere deserves more than a passing mention. This tournament has always drawn big crowds. The BNP Paribas Open regularly pulls in some of the largest tennis attendances outside the Grand Slams. It didn't earn the nickname Tennis Paradise without reason. But what happened in 2026 was different in texture. The Spanish contingent that traveled to California this fortnight didn't blend into the existing crowd. They absorbed it. Practice sessions were drawing crowds that felt disproportionate to the round. One of them treated to the sight of Alcaraz hitting forehands in a LeBron James Lakers jersey on a Monday afternoon. That detail matters more than it sounds. Alcaraz didn't show up to Indian Wells tense, calculated, or burdened by expectation. Smiling between points, engaging with fans after sessions, carrying himself like a man who genuinely cannot locate anything resembling pressure in his current mental state. His former coach Juan Carlos Ferrero, who parted ways with Alcaraz before this season began after years working together, recently admitted he unfollowed him on social media just to get some distance, because everywhere he looked, Alcaraz was there. On every tennis account, on every tournament feed, inescapable. That is not the profile of a player who is peaking too early. That is the profile of a player who has genuinely shifted into a different gear entirely. Now back to the court. Because the Dimitrov match told a very specific story about where Alcaraz stands right now. Grigor Dimitrov is not a soft second-round draw. At 34, he remains one of the most technically complete players on the ATP Tour. A one-handed backhand that disrupts rhythm, a serve that holds up under pressure, and enough variety in his game to make life uncomfortable for players who rely purely on power. He had already shown something at Indian Wells this week, beating Terence Atmain in 3 sets in the first round despite difficult, windy conditions. He came in with competitive match sharpness that Alcaraz, who received a first-round bye, simply didn't have. None of it mattered. Alcaraz broke Dimitrov's serve 3 times from 4 opportunities. He lost just 12 points across his own service games for the entire match. The lone break point Dimitrov earned in the second set, his only genuine moment of opportunity across 66 minutes, went nowhere. And when Alcaraz cracked a forehand cross-court winner to close the seventh game of the second set, Dimitrov walked to the net during the changeover and extended his hand for a high five. Not after the match, during it. That is a player acknowledging in real time that he is watching something he cannot solve. The win moved Alcaraz to 13-0 for the 2026 season. It was his 85th Masters 1000 victory. It extended his Indian Wells record to 21-3 since his debut here in 2021, and it set up a third-round encounter against 26th seed Arthur Rinderknecht, a player Alcaraz has beaten all 5 times they've met, across every surface they've played on. The path to a third Indian Wells title has rarely looked this clean, which brings us to the other side of this story, the side that the title of this video is actually built around. Djokovic won on Saturday, let's be clear about that. A 4-6, 6-1, 6-2 victory over Kamil Majchrzak is still a victory, and dismissing it entirely would be intellectually dishonest. But the manner of that win, and what it revealed about where Djokovic currently stands, is where things get genuinely interesting. Majchrzak is ranked 57th in the world. He is a solid, reliable professional who keeps the ball in play, constructs points intelligently, and doesn't panic easily. But he is not the kind of opponent that a player of Djokovic's caliber should be losing a set to, let alone spending 2 hours and 12 minutes figuring out. The first set wasn't even close. Majchrzak broke Djokovic twice and claimed the opener 6-4 before the Serbian found any rhythm at all. Then came the stomach problems, visible discomfort between points, a physical exhaustion that sat awkwardly on a man who, 6 weeks earlier, was competing in a Grand Slam final. Djokovic himself didn't hide from any of it afterwards. "It has been very challenging lately for me in Indian Wells," he said in his on-court interview. "It has been hard for me to find my A-game, particularly in the beginning of the tournament." He also singled out the California desert wind as one of the most disruptive conditions anywhere on tour. Gusts that change direction mid-rally, affect ball toss, and create a specific kind of tension that accumulates over the course of a match in ways that don't show up in any statistic. He's not wrong about the wind. Every player deals with it here, but Alcaraz dealt with it in 66 minutes and barely broke a sweat. That contrast is not a small detail. If both players advance as seeded, they meet in the semifinals. That is the draw. It was confirmed before a single ball was struck in competition. Djokovic's projected path runs through Alexander Kovacevic in the third round. Then likely a fourth-round collision with defending champion Jack Draper, who returned to the tour just last week in Dubai after months away with an arm injury, before any potential meeting with Alcaraz. Draper is the wild card in all of this. He won Indian Wells in 2025 by beating Alcaraz in the semifinals, one of the genuine upsets of last season. He arrived in California this week in rebuilding mode, having not played since withdrawing from the US Open mid-tournament. His match fitness is an open question, but Draper on a hard court, even at 70%, is a dangerous fourth-round opponent for anyone, including a Djokovic who is still clearly finding his footing. Should Djokovic navigate that section cleanly and reach the semi-finals, he would face an Alcaraz who at current trajectory will have played 4 matches of increasing authority in front of a crowd that grows louder and more energized with every passing round. The Spanish army doesn't thin out as the tournament progresses. It builds. There is a broader conversation sitting underneath all of this that the tennis world has been circling for months without quite landing on directly. Djokovic at 38 is still one of the best tennis players alive. His run to the Australian Open final, beating Jannik Sinner in the semifinals before pushing Alcaraz to 4 sets in the final itself, proved that the competitive fire hasn't dimmed and the big match instincts remain intact. He told the media before this tournament began that he wants more titles, more Grand Slams, and that he has proven to himself and others that he can still compete at the very highest level. All of that is true, and none of it changes what is happening in Indian Wells right now. Because the shock isn't just about one difficult, Second round match. It's about arriving at a tournament you've won 5 times in a country where you've historically commanded enormous respect and discovering that the entire gravitational center of the event has shifted. The crowds aren't gravitating toward his matches the way they once did. The energy in the stands belongs to someone else entirely. Every corner of the tennis garden circles back to one name, and it isn't Djokovic's. The Spanish army has genuinely and comprehensively taken over California. Djokovic has experienced rival popularity before. He spent the better part of his career competing against the fan bases of Federer and Nadal, earning respect through results rather than affection. He knows what it feels like to walk into a hostile crowd and win anyway. That experience is not nothing, but Alcaraz in 2026 is a different kind of force. 13 matches without a loss, 2 titles already, a career Grand Slam completed at 22 years old, a fan base that doesn't just support him, it relocates to wherever he plays and rebuilds the atmosphere from the ground up. Indian Wells in 2026 isn't a tennis tournament with a popular Spanish player in the draw. It's Alcaraz's tournament, temporarily housed in the California desert, with everyone else competing for second place. Whether Djokovic has enough left to challenge that reality is the only question worth asking from this point forward, and the answer starts forming in the next few days. If you've made it this far and you're not subscribed yet, you're genuinely making this harder on yourself. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with this channel as Indian Wells 2026 builds toward what could be one of the most compelling semifinals this tournament has produced in years. The Spanish army has taken over. The draw is set, and Djokovic is still standing, just not quite where he expected to be.